Welcome to Brick by Brick Today, a podcast hosted by Danosky Associates for nonprofit leaders building a better world.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Brick by Brick Today, a Danosky Associates original podcast. I'm Sharon Danosky, and today I have a special guest calling in to speak with us about how nonprofit leaders can encourage communities to unify to create a network of support in times of need and to perpetuate a really vital resource. I'm pleased to welcome Amy Blaymore Paterson, the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, CLCC, as it's otherwise known. Amy, thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Sharon. Thanks for having me.
So, Amy, you started at CLCC in 2010. Can you share with us a little bit about your background, what brought you to CLCC, and what your vision was when you started there?
Sure. So I am an attorney, and I was practicing law for over 20 years and had planned to be an environmental lawyer, and that is what I became. And so I did that again for over 20 years, representing a lot of citizens groups, doing a lot of land conservation work for land trusts and landowners, doing a lot of municipal work. And my heart was always with the land conservation work. And after doing the private practice gig for about, again, over 20 years, I had an opportunity to work for the Trust for Public Land in the Connecticut office and was really excited to take my passion and bring it full time to land conservation. And worked there for 2 years and had a fabulous experience at TPL. And then when the opportunity arose to become the first executive director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, I grabbed it. And it has been, that was in 2010. So it's been going on 11 years now. And I was thrilled. You know, CLCC was an association working under fiscal sponsorship. And if we have time, I can give you some of the history of the organization and how it evolved. But basically, again, a small organization intended to be the service provider for land trusts as well as an advocate for the land conservation community. And so, again, being the first executive director, I felt like it was kind of a wide open field for me to take a very small organization and build it into something very special and much needed for the state of Connecticut's land conservation community.
So I'd love to hear how you started with, because there was no track record, there was no history. You were kind of making this up as you went along, it sounds like.
Well, I wouldn't say there was no history. And again, this does go to the evolution of this organization, but CLCC was formed through the merger of two predecessor organizations. One was the Land Trust Service Bureau, which was created in the 1980s and had fabulous leadership that really provided the land trusts in the state with the types of services and technical assistance that they needed. And then the other organization was the Land Conservation Coalition of Connecticut, which was an advocacy group. Both were housed under the Nature Conservancy.
Okay.
And then in 2010, well, I should back up a minute. So in 2006, they merged the groups, created CLCC with the intention of making it a more efficient organization that could then provide those types of services for land trusts under the same roof. So again, we were both a service provider as well as an advocate. So there was plenty of history in that regard, but I was the first executive director. They put in place a business plan and then I was able to take off.
So how did you shape your vision? What was the vision? You must have come into this with an idea of what you wanted to do because you had such great history and background. What was your vision and how did you begin to make that happen?
Well, you know, I think because I had the opportunity to work with land trusts and had a really good feel of how important it was for that community to have the support that it needs to, you know, be strong and be vital for forever. Because their mission, again, is they've been entrusted with a resource, land and water, and to protect it forever. And so I think in terms of a vision, it was, okay, what does the land conservation community need? And having worked as an attorney and saw that end of it, and then worked at the Trust for Public Land and was able to see, even in a broader sense, all the components that go into putting together a land conservation transaction, I knew that they needed support in that way. And it was going to be very exciting for me to take that experience and put it to work. But what I didn't have much experience in, and this was the part that I think I have been able to grow with myself, is the organizational structures. You know, if I created a nonprofit as an attorney, that was the easy part. The hard part is sustaining the organization. And these land trusts I saw needed support in that way as well. And so that's really been part of the, part of my vision was making sure that land trusts were going to have the support they needed in every way, from a land conservation deal to organizational governance, and to be able to sustain themselves in perpetuity.
So, many of the land trusts really were concerned about the fundamentals. So how did you approach that? How did you build that fundamental base for the land trust? Because so many of the land trusts are much stronger. I remember working with you in 2010. And when I look at where so many of the land trusts were then and where they are now, is really significant progress. So how did you approach building that sustainability and capacity?
Well, again, it wasn't as if I did have to start completely from scratch. The CLCC had, and the Land Trust Service Bureau before it had an annual conference, and that would bring together, over 150 people, and they would have some workshops. They would also have workshops during the year. So training and education was kind of a foundational component of the organization, and I was able to build from there. So of course, we continued our annual conference, which has now grown, until the pandemic, when we were getting, at that point we were getting together at Wesleyan University, and up until 2020, we had grown that conference from about 150, 160 participants to close to 550. And it became one of the, if not the largest state association conferences in the country. And so you combine that opportunity with workshops and networking and just that sense of community, as well as one-off workshops, which we would offer during the year. So I would say, from the fundamental standpoint, that's where we started. And of course, programmatically, we have grown significantly from that point.
And you also ended up taking a role of being a lot of coach and mentor to a lot of these land trusts, because you would drive, all throughout the state to meet with them. We were just talking about that, putting in hours and hundreds of miles on your car. What did that do as you met with these individual land trusts? How did you see them grow? What changes did you notice? And how did you assess and evaluate their needs going forward?
Well, I will say that, people say to me, how did you, like you just asked, how did you get to this point? And I'd say it's a lot of mileage. Connecticut has about 130 land trusts, give or take. And many of them are single town land trusts. And so, yeah, it was the kind of thing where fortunately we're a small state. So in the morning I could be in Southeast Connecticut, and in the evening I could be in Northwest Connecticut. And I think it really, part of my job in the earliest days was really giving these land trusts a strong sense of connection to an organization that was there for them. And that meant, as you said, it meant going out and meeting with them individually, meeting with their boards, attending their events, getting a sense of who they were and what they needed, on an individual basis. But it also gave me a chance to bring them together regionally. Yeah. And that was a big part of what I did in the earliest years of my tenure here at CLCC. And starting in 2012, I would bring the groups together for very informal summits, just to sit down and network with each other. So it was not only my meeting with them and getting a sense of what they needed, but it was a lot of listening to them, both in talking with me, but in talking with each other, to get a sense of what they needed and how they could use each other to develop this community into a stronger and more informed one.
So from that initial evolution, you have now evolved to doing a lot of what we're calling advanced initiative work. Can you talk a little bit how that advanced initiative work came about and how it's functioning today?
Yeah, and I really credit the Land Trust for the evolution of our programming, because we responded, we see things, but your programs are only as good as the participants and their energy level and their willingness and their desire to learn. And the Land Trust in Connecticut are just fabulous, and they want to learn. They know better than anyone what their mission is all about. And so just to give you a sense of that, I mean, as I said just a minute ago, so we started with these one-off regional summits, and then we started to pull together focus groups, which were a little more topically based in the sense that we would bring together, for example, treasurers, or we bring together executive staff, which we continue to do annually. So we would bring together individuals serving in the same capacity in land trusts all over the state and get them together once a year to talk with a facilitator. And so, that's one end of the spectrum. It went from this informality, this networking, kind of info sharing, this venting sessions, to more topically based. And then as their needs grew, and as we recognized that they were really learning from each other, we started these regional advancement initiatives. And that I could thank, for funding from some very engaged community foundations. The Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut, the Connecticut Community Foundation, they saw the value in having a convener like CLCC bring these land trusts together and start to learn from each other in a more advanced way. And those advancement initiatives would focus around different areas. So it could be around stewardship, it could be around communications. We studied shared services. And so various topics that these groups were interested in. And we'd bring together a cohort, and they would both receive technical assistance, but they would also there would also always be a regional component to the project, including, like, for example, a mapper that they could develop and sit around the table and really learn from. And then from there, and so we've been doing those since 2014. And actually, I should say the first one was funded through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, part of the USDA, and they really recognized the opportunity here to provide technical assistance to a group of land trusts at the same time. And then that grew into our Advanced Collaboration and Merger Assistance Program, because as land trusts were working together in the same region and developing not only trust, but also a common focus area, the conversation started to evolve into, well, gee, maybe we should be thinking about a more permanent structural alignment. And so this Advanced Collaboration and Merger Assistance Program, which, Sharon, of course, you're one of our facilitators in the most recent one, has given them that opportunity.
And it's funny. I so appreciate your giving so much credit to the land trust, and the land trusts do deserve a lot of credit for really, coming forward. But I think the one thing that I've noticed is, number one, you are a convener, and you created that space, and you hold that space where the land trusts can come together. And I think that is a very unique talent that you have brought to CLC to do that. It's almost when, someone is, we hear this a lot, someone running for office or someone looking to set up a new initiative, one of the key things they do is a listening tour. Well, it feels, Amy, as if you are always on a listening tour. And can you talk a little bit about how that has engendered trust among the land trusts? Because I see it with every land trust I work with you, is that underlying sense of trust that you've got their back. So how did that evolve?
Well, before I even address that, though, I just want to say that that's very nice of you to give me so much credit, and I'm proud of the work that I have accomplished at CLCC. But it has truly been a team effort. I mean, in my earliest stages, the Connecticut Forest and Park Association, it was our, before TNC, after TNC, CFPA became our fiscal sponsor, and they really were, so tremendously important to the growth of this organization. As was our steering committee, which, many of those folks have been involved with CLCC long before, when I was still practicing law. So they were really committed to building this organization, and they had a vision. And that grew into our board of directors and our advisory council. And this was truly a team effort from, in many, many respects. It's really been a tremendous and exciting opportunity. But to go to your question about building trust, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about driving around the state and meeting with land trusts. And I think it's really nice for them to know that they have, we are there for them. This state association we are set up for land trusts. That's who we are. And so I think it's really important for land trusts to know that they have that organization representing them, whether it's out in the field through technical assistance and having their back in that regard, or at the Capitol, which we are extremely involved with through our advocacy work, to know that we are their voice and we are their leader and we are their partner. And I think that engenders trust, when you can work with organizations throughout the state and build that sense of community, they feel a part of something very, very special and bigger than themselves individually.
It is, as I listen to you, you really do exemplify that servant leadership model, that model of leading from behind, listening to what people want, coaching, encouraging, and providing the resources that people need to grow. And I think that is such a valuable example that so many people in the nonprofit sector can really learn from. There's another thing I kind of want to talk a little bit about. As you know, I'm involved in doing a lot of consulting around raising money. And I have watched you with your donors of how you bring them into the process, how you communicate with them frequently, how you share things frequently. Could you talk a little bit about what you do and how you make sure that those who are providing you the financial resources stay engaged and understand the work that you're doing so that they continue to support your work financially?
Yeah, well, as a small organization, I think that we have that opportunity to have personal relationships with our individual donors as well as the foundations that support us. And the land trusts community supports us too, as do many towns. And so I think, again, one of the benefits of being a small organization, which the flip side is it's a ton of work for sure, but it is a labor of love, is to be able to really develop personal relationships, have that opportunity through individual emails, right to phone calls, to visits out in the field when we were able to do that, and look forward to doing that again. But mostly through our communications. We are able to celebrate the work of 130 land trusts or so. Every month we have a communication called #LoveYourCTLandTrust, and it's a lot of fun. And I think, again, that makes our donors feel a sense of community and know that their support of CLCC is really paying dividends, because it's not just about supporting our organization, it's supporting the organizations that we support. And I think that's been hugely helpful.
So what is your favorite part of the job you do on a day-to-day basis?
So I apologize to all the listeners out there if you can hear my cell phone ringing off in the distance. That's a tough question to ask, because honestly, Sharon, and I truly mean this, with some exception here and there, I really love every part of the job. And I think it's all the moving parts of the job that I enjoy. No single day is like the day before or the day after. Every day is different. But I think that collectively, all of those things bring me to why I love the job the most. And it's to have the opportunity to work with land trusts across Connecticut that are, comprised of the most dedicated, passionate, generous individuals that I feel, that I could ever have the opportunity to work for. When we have our meetings, I had one last night, we had 3 evening meetings this week. And every time, I get into one of those meetings and I'm tired, it's at night, I leave those meetings and I can't go to sleep, because I'm so excited after them. And I'm so proud of the folks that are in that room who are dedicating their time as volunteers and as staff to a mission that really will go on way beyond our lifetime. And that's the way people think. This is something much bigger than ourselves individually. And that's the mindset of the Land Trust in Connecticut. And my favorite part of the job is having the opportunity to work with them every day.
And you can tell you have such passion, for the work you do. And I think that's so critical for anyone in a leadership position of a nonprofit. You have to love it, because, the hours are crazy, the work is crazy, the intensity is crazy, all of that. But, if you love what you do, it becomes energizing, not exhausting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do you see in the future? You know, crystal ball, in the next 5 years, how do you think the landscape of, you know, the environmental movement, the land trust, will change because of the seeds you sowed in 2010?
Well, taking it away from this, from us personally in CLCC, I mean, I think that we are facing a climate crisis, and the world is recognizing the value of land conservation in helping to mitigate the impacts of that crisis. You know, President Biden announced U.S.'s commitment to the 30 by 30 initiative, which is, you know, protecting 30% of the lands and waters by 2030. And that's a lofty goal. And
Yeah.
that's a lofty goal. But we have an opportunity in Connecticut to really be a part of that because we have such a strong land trust community and a commitment to land conservation. And so, you know, how I see the next few years playing out is to continue doing what we're doing, but a lot more of it. And so we need to make sure that we are providing the land trusts and their communities with the services that they need to be viable in the long term. We also need to make sure that more people have access to the land, that more people are, benefiting from the health and ecosystem, so to speak. You know, all the benefits that land brings to communities, from, again, personal and public health to the actual environmental benefits that they bring. More people need access to that. And so I feel that our land trusts have an opportunity to connect with more people and become more welcoming, even more welcoming than they already are. And then from a policy standpoint, I think we build from that as well. We need to be making sure that the state of Connecticut and nationally, we are investing in land conservation to ensure that we can meet those 30 by 30 initiative types of goals, and invest in this land and water so that it is going to be there for generations to come. So I think we've got some very lofty goals, and I've got a big vision. But again, I think it kind of comes down to the day-to-day work and making sure that our land trusts are prepared and they've got the support that they need and their communities are engaged.
Certainly, this pandemic, has brought out a lot of changes. And one of the things that we saw was so many more people getting outside and using the trails that that Land Trust had created. What are some of your thoughts, some observations as we're kind of hopefully going into the final phase of this pandemic? What have been some of the benefits that has come about, particularly for the environment and the land trusts whose mission it is to preserve those environments forever?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, if this year has taught us anything in that way, it's just the value of, of being outside to our mental health, our physical health, and our communities. And I think, you know, land trusts for sure saw the benefits of that. More people are realizing how important they are to these areas that people many times didn't even know whose trails they were, and now they're really recognizing that it's the land trusts and their communities that are so important to having that access to the outside. And again, I hope that means more membership, you know, better membership for our land trusts, more support. But I also think it means that, you know, as a state, we can be looking to justify even more so investing in land conservation programs, as well as nationally, and seeing that money come to Connecticut and really support these areas that need protecting, not only in terms of the original acquisition of them, but the long-term sustainability of the lands and making sure that they're properly stewarded and that we have those investments there as well. So I think the benefit certainly of the last year has been just seeing how valuable our land and waters are to our communities for so many reasons. And I think that will lead us well into the future if we are committed to it.
Amy, I think that's a perfect place to close. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and sharing how important it is that we protect the vital resources that sustain us all. And I hope that you've learned something from today's episode. Amy, thank you again for your time and willingness to speak with me about this important topic. Thanks everyone so much for listening, and thank you for taking the first step in building a better world.
You have been listening to Brick by Brick Today, a podcast presented by Danosky Associates and produced by Casey Kroll. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we invite you to become a Danosky Associates member, where you will find additional podcasts and other exclusive content to help you build a better world. Visit us at www.danosky.com. Thanks for listening, and thanks for making the world a better place.